For years, I sat on federal hiring panels. Every candidate who sat in front of us had already been found qualified by HR. So, if everybody in the room was qualified, what exactly were we looking for? 4 things: the verification gate, the judgment call, the follow test, and the eye test. Those 4 things usually told us who was ready to be hired and who only looked ready on paper. Let's start with the first one, the verification gate. Here's how it worked. Before you ever sat in that chair, HR already decided you were qualified. That happened before we ever saw you. We weren't checking that again, but what we were checking was whether your story held up once we started asking you those questions. And the first thing I read was always the summary, not because it needed to sound impressive. I read it for context. It needed to prove you understood the job. Apply for a law enforcement position, and your summary better read like law enforcement, not like you're applying to someone's executive assistant position. A few things made me stop and question a resume though. Timeline jumps with no clear reason for them. And this one surprised the panel. Military titles that read like a code. Somebody would write, served as a Bravo 66.5 or something like that, and I had no idea what that actually meant day to day. Not a knock on your service at all, but it is a translation problem. And now it's a question I have to ask you in the room instead of already knowing it on your paper. Here's another one people don't expect. More experience wasn't always better. 10 years doing it one way in a local department, coming into a job that trains you in its own way, that's sometimes a red flag, not a strength. Because people with a lot of outside experience are often the hardest to retrain. Now the question became, can we train this person our way? Or are we going to spend all our time trying to undo the way they've always done it? That didn't mean the experience had no value. It raised a question. Experience alone wasn't enough. The resume got you through HR, but the verification gate told us whether the person in front of us could back up what we had on paper, what we read on paper. And even when the experience checked out, we still had a harder question to answer. Experience tells me what you've done. Judgment tells me whether I can trust you. Those are not the same thing. Judgment is completely a different animal. And if your resume still isn't getting you into that room, I put a hiring panel resume scorecard below the video. It's 12 questions across 6 areas, and it'll show you where your problems may be before you start rewriting the whole thing. It's in the description when you're ready. Judgment, that was the second thing we were testing, whether we said it out loud or not. We'd ask ethics questions built around scenarios. Something like, see a coworker take something that isn't theirs. What do you do? A lot of people, especially with the military background, would answer it in a way that they were trained to look out for each other. They would respond with something like this. I'd talk to them, tell them not to do it again, and then if it happens the second time, then I'd tell the supervisor. That instinct makes sense inside a unit, but in an interview for a position, whether it requires a clearance or not, it's the wrong answer. And it told us something real about how you will handle risk on the job. And sometimes, even my own judgment was wrong. I remember debating another panel member for a long time about one candidate. On paper, she met the minimum requirements, barely. I didn't think she was ready for the level of responsibility that this job carried, but another member on the panel did. We went back and forth about it for a while. She ended up getting the job. Years later, she was one of the best employees in that organization. I was wrong about her, and I'm glad I was. That's judgment. It's not about whether you technically qualify. It's whether the panel walks away trusting the decisions you'd make when nobody's telling you the right answer. And sometimes even the panel gets that read wrong. But judgment wasn't the only place candidates lost us. Sometimes we simply couldn't follow the answers. That's the third one, the follow test. This one gets misunderstood the most. Communication doesn't mean charisma or speaking perfectly. It means we could actually follow your answer without getting lost halfway through. Most of our interviews open with, tell me about yourself, and it went one of 2 ways. Some people would tell us they're from Cleveland, they've got 3 dogs and a cat, and the interview started sinking right there. The ones who impressed us talked about their value instead, what they'd actually done, what they could bring to the organization, what they were looking for, and why this organization. I'd sit up and start listening the second that happened. Once we moved into the scenario questions, the strongest candidates would repeat the questions back, walk us through what they were facing, what they were thinking, and where it landed. Some people would work in a hypothetical before getting into the real outcome. That was fine. We'd give partial credit for it. But a real story always beat a hypothetical one. A real story is proof you'd actually done the thing, not just thought about how you would do it. And here's something most candidates don't realize. If you repeated a question back to us before answering, we knew exactly what you were doing. You were buying yourself a few seconds to think. We understood it. It didn't cost you anything. Even sounding rehearsed never bothered me because it told me you'd actually prepared. And in an interview, prepared beats trying to wing it every time. What sunk people wasn't nerves. It was going all the way around Robin Hood's barn for 2 questions in a row without ever landing on what we actually asked. And if your resume still isn't getting you into that room, I put a hiring panel resume scorecard below the video. It's 12 questions across 6 areas, and it'll show you where your problems may be before you start rewriting the whole thing. It's in the description when you're ready. Now, the last one, the eye test. The military teaches you always say we. It's baked into the culture, and for a good reason. Nobody wins alone. But in the interview, that habit worked against people constantly. Somebody would answer a question and would never once say I. I'd stop them mid-sentence. You keep saying we. What did you do? What was your part in this? Some candidates could answer that immediately. When they couldn't separate their contribution from the team's, we had no way to give them credit for the result. And that need for evidence is what brings me to one candidate I'll never forget. His written resume was weak, genuinely weak, to the point that before he even walked in, I think we all already decided that we were just going to go through the motions with him. He had earned the interview, but nobody on that panel expected much from him. Then he sat down. From tell me about yourself all the way to do you have any questions for us? He was sharp, solid answers. When it was his turn, he had his own questions lined up and ready. He blew us away. We moved him straight to the top of the file. That man is a deputy chief of police today. His resume never proved what he could do. His interview did. If you're wondering whether your resume is underselling you the way his did, use the hiring panel resume scorecard below this video. It takes less than 5 minutes and it will show you exactly where your resume may be leaving the hiring panel with questions. Don't wait for the interview to rescue a resume that isn't telling your full story. Your resume gets you into the room, but once you're sitting in that chair, we need evidence. Real answers, your own contributions, proof instead of a guess. That's what gives a panel a reason to score you higher. The scoring system exists for a reason. The candidate who gives us the strongest evidence earns the strongest score, not the candidate we simply happen to like the most. If this helped you understand what the panel is scoring, I made another video that shows you how to perform once you're sitting in that chair. I walk you through a 6-step interview system, including how to research the room before you walk into it. 2 questions that can make the hiring manager remember you, and a free tool I use with my coaching clients to rehearse difficult questions before the real interview. Watch it next and walk into your next interview prepared, not trying to figure out everything once you're already in the room. I'll see you there, right here.